Hopefully you're caffeinated up. Bill and I will do our best to keep it somewhat entertaining, but it is a slightly dry subject, but obviously pretty important. So that's good. So we're going to talk about ArcGIS and SSL, and we're going to talk some fundamentals all the way on up through how it's handled across ArcGIS Enterprise. What we want to do, though, before we get started really with anything, we want to show you guys some common problems that we have seen. And actually, I would love to hear some people shout out some common problems that they have had. And we're gonna resolve these problems throughout the course of our presentation today. So we're gonna look at those common problems, and then we're gonna build our way up. So understanding fundamentals of secure communication. We're gonna talk about implementing SSL at the web tier, and then how that is impacted within ArcGIS Enterprise itself. So we're going to kind of build it from the ground up, and hopefully when you guys walk out of here, you will have no more SSL problems. A lot of light bulbs will have gone off, and only a few of us will have nodded asleep during the course of this 60 minutes. So, all right, so let's talk about some of these common problems that we see out there related to SSL. Some of these problems happen at the browser level. Has anybody ever seen Chrome do this to you? Yeah, a few hands. But in particular, how about maybe Chrome has done this to you, but that same URL in Firefox looks like this? Anybody seen that? We got a few? Yeah, somebody already knows the answer. Don't give away the answers yet. So we've seen that. So there's issues at the browser. How about this one? This is a unique one where you have a layer, you've added it to a web map, and then you want to do something within that web map. You want to perform some analysis on it, and it's blank, you can't select it. Remember, I got a few head shakes out there. Okay, that's a common problem. Or this one, maybe you've gotten past that moment of federation. You have a question? Oh, okay, all right. I thought we had questions already. You already had it. I like it, though. That's good. You run into this. So this is an example where we've actually federated, but now we can't select the hosting server. It's there and it's grayed out. I mean, these problems can be frustrating on a good day, right? So these are some of the things that we've come across. How about anybody else have any other things that they think are SSL related and they want us to think about as we're going through these slides? Oh, mobile apps. Mobile. That's a good one. All right.
Print. Yeah, print's a very popular one.
Print. I got a hand. Yeah. Servers and working groups.
Not part of a domain.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yep.
Yeah.
Not part of a domain. Yep. In the back. All right. Publishing. So publishing a hosted feature service. And we're probably getting some error while publishing the hosted feature service. All right, we should be covering that.
Okay.
All right, very good. Some right here, yeah. We'll hit you first, then we're going back. Internal cert authorities. Yep. All right, good. That's a good one. Yep. Adding server from the portal admin.
Oh, you mean you can't do it here, but you can do it in Portal Admin? Oh, that's interesting.
All right.
Okay.
We'll learn something together then.
Okay.
All right,
okay.
Here we go. Anybody else, any other good ones? These all sound pretty common, which is good. Hopefully we're going to cover all these things. All right. Well, that's good. This is what we want to do. We're going to have some aha moments, hopefully, over the course of the next hour. And if Bill and I do our job, you guys will feel real comfortable getting through here. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Bill, who's going to get us started and talk about some of the fundamentals of secure communication.
All right. Can you see something, I assume? All right, very good. So like I said, I'm going to talk through, I'm going to try to at least go over the basics. I know everyone deals with SSL issues, but they may not know like the why and how of things are happening. So I'm just going to spend a handful of minutes just hopefully defining some basic concepts of SSL. So SSL, in case you don't know, it stands for Secure Socket Layer. It's a standard security technology. Actually, the most prevalent standard, the most secure out there today is actually TLS version 1.2. In the plenary on when was that? Tuesday morning, we made a note about ArcGIS Online, for example, is now only going to be 1.2. So what does that mean to many of you? Well, if many of you are using modern browsers and things like that, it may not be anything you need to worry about. But if you've developed back-end systems that are making HTTP calls out to ArcGIS Online or something like that, and they're perhaps using older protocols or older versions of, say, OpenSSL that may not know about TLS 1.2 yet, you're going to have some problems. That's where things are going to kind of break a little bit. And just so you know, at ArcGIS Enterprise 10.7, we enforce version 1.2 by default. Now you can go in and adjust that, but just be aware of that as well. Fundamentals also include at the basic level this concept of certificate authorities. Certificate authorities are the things that create and sign certificates, right? So on the open internet, there's things like VeriSign, GoDaddy. You've probably seen commercials for stuff like that. But then many of you, one of these gentlemen talked about internal certificates. So some of you may work for government organizations that have disconnected networks, and you have your own set of certificate authorities that issue certificates both for servers as well as perhaps user identity certificates as well. And all of this, you know, I know many of you, when you think PKI or you've heard PKI, you may initially think it means user certificates, but really PKI, the public key infrastructure, is the essence of how secure communication works. And I'll try to explain that here just a little bit. And when you're working with ArcGIS Enterprise, you know, there's some things that you have to do extra in secure environments, which we'll hopefully touch on as well. So let's just talk about the certificate authority for a moment. This is the root of trust of communication. So with any network, whether you're, you know, on the public or internal, there's always going to be certificate authorities. Okay, and the certificate authorities have the role of signing and issuing certificates. And what is a certificate? A certificate really is a combination of a private key and public key pairing. That's kind of if you ever go and decide to do a little research on the PKI environment, that's the essence of it. So certificate authorities are the ones that have to be trusted, and they're the things that also sign and issue certificates. And here, clients, they don't have to necessarily be an entity such as a person. Sometimes clients can also be what we call non-person entities. So they can also function in client capacities that's not necessarily associated with a human. Just be aware of that. Now, many of us also deal with intermediate certificate authorities as well. Just thought we would throw this out there so when you see these things, you'll know what those are. So you still have certificate authorities, but also a lot of times you'll have these intermediate certificate authorities. So the certificate authorities may delegate through the process of the PKI infrastructure to an intermediate certificate authority, and then it's those that actually can sign and issue certificates from there. So if you go get a certificate from DigiCert and you get it delivered to you, you actually see that it's signed by, you know, some top level DigiCert, but then there's also going to be an intermediate certificate authority in that chain as well. Okay? Everyone okay so far? Is this foreign language to anyone, or I just want to make sure people follow me here. All right, so let's talk about the essence of how this works between a client and a server. All right, so you have a certificate authority. We've issued certificates to a server. We've issued a certificate to a client. Now, here's what's kind of happening. Let's say the client says, hey, I want to talk to you, server, right? And I want to talk to you over SSL. The server says, okay, that's cool. Here is my certificate. Here is my public key portion of my certificate. So when you do that, the client gets this certificate back, and at that point, it has to decide if it trusts the certificate signing chain of that server, right? The trust comes into play of if you have imported, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, if you've imported that cert chain into your browser, into your system, that's what decides if you trust it or not. And if you don't trust it, then we'll show you what happens there in a minute. Now, I just want to make also one thing clear. If you, some of you out there, you know, I'm talking about this public and private key a little bit. Always protect your private keys. If any of you know what I'm talking about here, the way secure encryption works is The server hands you its public certificate portion of it, and then the client uses that to encrypt and send information back. And the server then can only use its private key to decrypt that traffic. That's the way secure communication works. The private key is the only thing that can decrypt information that's been encrypted with the public version of that certificate, okay? So always protect your private keys. That's, if your private key ever becomes compromised, then you got to get new certificates or something like that. Now, there's also things out there called certificate revocation list. So in the situation where your private key has been compromised or something like that has happened, then you can say, hey, certificate authority, revoke this certificate. So if anyone tries to use it anymore or anything like that, then it will actually block it from happening. So when the client tries to talk to the server, the client actually in browsers have the smarts to say, hey, let me go check it against the CRL for this certificate authority. And if it's been blacklisted, they call it, then your browser actually won't even proceed. Most browsers, you can't even say, hey, proceed anyway or something like that. It totally blocks it if it's made it onto a CRL. So these are all just basic fundamentals to be aware of. Now, how do you trust things? So how do you decide if your workstation trust different certificate authorities? Well, there's a thing on Windows called the Trust Store that you can open. And within here, there's a number of areas where you can have trusted root certificate authorities. So as you can see here, this is a copy of one of our machines where we have a whole bunch of standard ones out there. We got some Esri internal ones as well. So you have root certificates that get trusted. On a Mac, I'm not a Mac person, so I don't even know why Craig puts this in here. I don't know why anyone would own a Mac to begin with.
How many Mac users? Come on, give me some hands here. All right.
Oh, that's usually it's more Mac users than Windows users. All right. Well, anyway, Mac has the same thing. I can't really speak to what this thing is, but the keychain access area in a Mac, basically the same concept. You got to import certificates for your workstation. All right. So then also you have your browser. Also when you're using a browser, that's actually what's reading those trust stores and deciding if it trusts or not. Within a Windows environment, your browser actually uses the Windows Trust Store, and be aware that Internet Explorer and Chrome both use the Microsoft Trust Store on a Windows environment. Same thing for a keychain for Chrome. It uses whatever's been imported into the keychain access area. Now, this is important because we've answered this questions for customers many times is, hey, why does this work in Chrome but not in Firefox? I got both. And that is because Firefox has its own separate trust store. So if you do not deliberately also import certificates into the Firefox trust store, you potentially run into situations where it's not trusting websites, but it does work in Chrome. Anyone run into this scenario and just kind of wonder why? So that's, if you don't know why, that's why, because it has its own separate trust store, so you have to go through and import that stuff to Firefox as well. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Craig now. Hopefully he's going to show you something to bring it home, make it a little more clear.
Yep, we're just going to do a quick, a little bit of a demo here to show you those trust stores and where they reside in your machine. So, Bill was talking about the fundamentals here, the idea of a certificate authority establishing trust. Maybe there's a trust chain if we have multiple certificate authorities in there, those intermediate CAs. And then we as users want to understand, how do I know where those are on my machine or what I trust. So here I'm obviously on my Windows machine right now, and if I want to understand what my Windows machine trusts from a certificate authority perspective, what we can do is we can use the Microsoft Management Console. So if we just type MMC in here, and we're going to add the certificate snap in. So we're just going to go to this. The reason I go through this is there's actually, you have some options here. You can have trust stores that are specific to your user or to a service account or to the computer account. So going this way gives you these options to choose. So I'm going to look at my whole machine here, and we're going to add that in. And so now what I can do is I can browse my trust store here on my machine. So I want to look at the trusted root certification authorities. And if we open it up, these are all the CAs that my machine trusts by default. So you can see, anytime you buy a laptop, from Best Buy or from your company provides you with one, it comes with these things pre-installed. And then you have the ability to add them if you have your own certificate authorities on your internal networks and things like that to establish your trust chains. So, here's an example, right? We've got DigiCert, here's the Esri one. We have an internal certificate authority that we use, so we import that, so that's there. And then additionally, just to show you the idea of the trust chains, here's my intermediate certificate authorities. And if I click here, you can see we have a handful of those as well. So through this certificate snap-in, that's how I can get to understanding what authorities my machine trusts. I'm going to take one more second here, and I want to show you guys Firefox just to quickly look at its trust store. So that is done if we come into the options of the browser, and under privacy and security, and we scroll down here, we're going to view certificates. And here under authorities, here's all the authorities it trusts. And if I just kind of scroll through this very quickly, you can see that is a completely different list than what was there on my operating system. So you start to understand, like, hey, why might one site be trusted by Firefox and another, that same site not trusted by Chrome or IE or Edge for that matter, okay? So, one hint in understanding sort of some of those fundamentals and then how our machines and our browsers, work with those certificate authorities. All right. Okay, I'm going to hand it back. Actually, I lied. I'm going to pick it up right here, aren't I? That's right, sorry. Usually I tease Bill for that here. So what I want to talk about now is we want to get into the next session, and this is about implementing SSL at the web tier. So from a web server perspective, how many of you all deploy web servers? Tomcat, IIS, on and on. Perfect. All right, great. So now that we have some of that fundamental knowledge, it's like, hey, how do we do this with our own web servers? So we're not using self-signed certs, or we're not forcing everybody to use HTTP. So what I want to do is really, ultimately, I just want to demystify this process, because I think a lot of people get started and they find it a little bit daunting. I hopefully you'll find it pretty easy. So why do we need to do this? Well, especially nowadays, some organizations, mandate HTTPS only, or they require signed certificates on there. And then coming forward, I know that Chrome and some other browsers are going to force HTTPS only. So this is really something that you kind of need to get your arms around. That being said, by default, web servers, when they are initially deployed, will only support HTTP. You need to do some configuration to put a signed certificate on that web server so it'll communicate across HTTPS. So that's what we're going to talk about now. What we've done here is I'm going to show you the few steps that you need to do to get a signed certificate and configure it against your web server. And in the past, we only kind of talked about this from an IIS perspective, and we did a little demo using Linux and Tomcat, but we're gonna do this via screenshots here in the interest of time, so we can focus more on the ArcGIS side here a little bit later on. The first step in this process is really creating a certificate signing request. So at the web server tier, what we need to do is we need to say, hey, this is the URL with which my users are going to access this site, and then here's some details about my organization, the name of the organization, the unit, where I'm from. These CSRs can be created in a lot of different ways. They can be created at the web server tier. So here up top is a screenshot in IIS. You do it right within there. You can use KeyTool. In this example down here, I was using KeyTool on a Linux instance to generate it. And but there's a number of ways. These are just a couple of screenshots of ways you can do it. You can do it using OpenSSL, and then there are both ways to generate CSRs in the portal and ArcGIS Server admin pages. All right. A note that we always just put in here is the common name property when you generate your CSR. That's the URL by which your web server is going to be accessed. A lot of people trip up on that. So it's just the URL, no HTTPS in front of it, and just using that. I want to highlight that point, because this is a point where a lot of people get tripped up.
When you go to create certificates, the name on that certificate, which we call the common name, needs to be the name by which the users are going to be accessing the URL. It is not necessarily the fully qualified domain name of the server, because you may have DNS aliases or something like that in play. So when you create certificates, it needs to be the URL by which it is going to be accessed by clients, which could be a very different name from the server itself. So I just want to highlight that point.
Yep, that's a great point. One other thing I want to highlight here is that depending on how we do this, as we create these CSRs, we're actually creating that trust store, that key store on the back end, which has the private key within it, which Bill mentioned is one of the most important parts of secure communication here. When you do it in IIS, it happens in one fell swoop. That gets happened and it's really hidden from the user and it's in the back end. If you're doing it with KeyTool and Tomcat, it's a two-step process. So as we generate that CSR, understand that in the background, that private key is being generated and held in that key store. So the next thing we do here is now we have this certificate signing request. We present this to a certificate authority. That certificate authority, might be something that's well known, a DigiCert, a VeriSign, a GoDaddy, but it may also be an internal certificate authority. It really depends on your organization and where you're trying to work with this web server. So we're going to request a certificate. In my example here, I'm submitting the text from the CSR process. It's a base 64 encoded bit of text. But you could do that all right at the certificate authority as well. Now, here's a thing. When you are submitting these certificate requests nowadays, you want to make sure that you enter a property that's called the subject alternative name, or the SAN, you'll see. So that SAN is something that is actually required by Chrome now. As a matter of fact. So it's not required by all browsers, but it is required by Chrome. And really, I think it was a long-standing protocol, and most browsers just hadn't enforced it, and Chrome about a year and a half ago started to enforce that. So coming back to our common problem. So you guys remember our very first common problem? We were talking about a notion of we get this message in Chrome, and but then in Firefox, it might work. This is what happens here. If you have web server certificates without a subject alternative name, Chrome is going to throw you an error on that. And so that's something to be aware of, that always put that SAN in there. They enforce it. It gets included with your as you present your CSR to your certificate authority. And then from a troubleshooting perspective, how do you know that? Like, how did you find that, right? It's important is you always want to expose these advanced options here. Whenever you get these browser issues, expose the advanced, particularly in Chrome, and it'll tell me right down here, hey, the problem with this URL is that the certificate doesn't specify a subject alternative name. So I would know right then, hey, I need to get my server certificate updated. And then another clue there is that, hey, this works in IE or Firefox, but not Chrome. That's another tip or a clue there. Okay, so we've created a certificate signing request. We presented it to our certificate authority. We can now go ahead and download this thing. And then the final step is to install and configure it against your web server. So I've got side-by-side screenshots here just to kind of show you, this process, this high-level process is really the same regardless of the operating system, regardless of the web server type. It is always the same. So on the left is IIS, and on the right is Tomcat on Linux. So what we've done here is, using the UI on IIS, we said, hey, here's our signed certificate, and we're going to pass it in, and we did the same thing using some commands in KeyTool on the right. And at that point, it is paired up the private and public keys. It's brought that in there. And now we need to bind the traffic on the web server to it. So again, in IIS, it's a very GUI-driven process where we say, hey, port 443, use this server certificate. In Linux on Tomcat, we've got to do some hand work here to configure that through a server.xml file. And then once we've completed that process, we've got those nice green locks in there to show us that we have secure and trusted communication. So again, it's CSR, present that to a certificate authority, download it, and configure your web server. And you'll be off to the races from there, okay? All right, so now we want to talk about, now we got some fundamentals, we're understanding it at the web server and the web tier, and now we want to talk about how does that play out on the ArcGIS side specifically. So I'm going to hand it back to Bill.
All right, thanks, Craig. So let's talk about, extending this down into the ArcGIS Enterprise level now. All right, so first let's kind of, which is probably the pain points here for a lot of you. There are, within a, ArcGIS Enterprise installation, most of you probably run distributed environments. You don't have everything on one machine. And you have all of these, different systems. And the thing is, I'm just going to click through this a little bit. There are many different components of SSL communication taking place here. And within each one of these places, the potential exists where you have to either perhaps replace certificates, self-signed certificates with properly signed certificates, as well as establishing trust. And I think this is the pain points that many of you, express, is that when you have distributed environments like that, there's a lot of these things to keep track of, and if you don't get one of them just right, then things seem to break and things like that. I know someone talked about printing a while ago, and even the print task, is a very specific thing where you got to make sure you have proper trust there so that it can reach out to all the other ArcGIS servers and to make the proper trust chain to get the data that it needs. So there are a lot of touch points of SSL within a ArcGIS Enterprise installation. All right, so how do we start to address it? So just to follow Craig's lead there on a little bit. So when you install ArcGIS Server or Portal or any of that stuff, it creates self-signed certificates that it uses to create a web service out on port 6443 or 7443 for Portal, 2443 for data store, right? So we automatically create a self-signed certificate based on the name of the server from, the software. That's the way it works. You don't ever want users going to those endpoints directly anyway. But those will be self-signed certificates, and they will be untrusted if you do try to access one of them. So what's the best way or the easiest way to have self-signed or to have signed certificates? Well, that is getting a properly signed certificate on your web server, install the web adapters and configure them, and then users are only ever communicating with the web server certificate itself. So if that's trusted, they're not talking directly to the back end on these self-signed certificates, and then life is good at this point. All right, so, and I'm just going to make one other point here. How many people replace the internal self-signed certificates because they think they're supposed to? Okay, so all right, how many people replace them because you're being told to? So a couple others, which is a different group of people. So that's interesting. Bill's opinion is never replace those self-signed certificates unless you have to. That's my opinion on this. Put web servers in place. Those are going to be the entry points that customers are interacting with. Don't replace those self-signed certificates unless you really need to, or security or somebody like that is scanning your network and saying, you have self-signed certificates, you got to get rid of them, okay? Use the web adapters and on the web server and do things that way up front.
And just to drive home your point, Bill, and make sure is probably 99.9% of your traffic will be happening through those web servers and through those signed server certificates. So it's really only those of you that are portal admins, ArcGIS server admins that would ever hit things on those internal ports.
Right. I've kind of already covered this, but just be aware that there are a number of internal ports that our software will install ArcGIS Enterprise. They will be self-signed certs by default, including GeoEvent, Web App Developer Edition. Notebook Server, which you might have seen that's coming with 10.7, is going to have its own port as well. So be aware there's going to be some new port requirements there. Also, the bullet there at the bottom, new at 10.7, when you install any of this stuff by default, new installations, we are now switching to HTTPS only. Previously with Portal and ArcGIS Server, when you installed it would be HTTP and HTTPS, but now it's going to be HTTPS only, starting with 10.7. Did you have a question, sir? Well, did you hear it? I couldn't hear you.
You're saying you have a signed certificate for your internal ports?
Yeah, that's what we've been using. It's created by our IT department. And what if we have a situation with that? Would it be okay? I know that
Sure.
we use it so that we can at least get user access for our network.
Sure. So the question is that, hey, we have CA, Certificate Authority, signed server certificates for those internal ports, 6443, 7443, 2443. Can we replace that? And the answer is yes, absolutely. You can replace that. You can put those on there. I think where Bill gets to with his point, and I'm wholeheartedly agree with him, is that a lot of times users will replace the internal certificates and they don't really have to, or they don't have the know-how, and then that causes a lot of problems. But if you know how to do it and you have the appropriate certificates across the right common names, then by all means, you certainly can do it and it will not cause problems. Bill and I work with a lot of customers where it's not a choice, it's a mandate. So it certainly can be done. Yeah, government or large private organizations, same thing. Yep.
Also, a lot of people, I'll just make this point while we're talking about it. Do we support wildcard certs? Absolutely. So I know a lot of people ask about wildcard certs as well. All right, let's keep moving forward so we don't run out of time too much. So how do you go about updating internal certificates? So let's take, for example, Portal first. So basically, we install the software with a self-signed certificate. However, if you need to replace it, or security or otherwise, then how do you do that? Well, we actually provide admin APIs where you can go in and basically update the certificate that's there with a properly signed certificate. It can either be a certificate that's created through external means, or you can generate the CSR process from within this portal admin. All right, so this is one, we do provide the ways for you to come in here and be able to do that within the portal admin API. Now, some of you that may work in closed environments, especially Craig and I have a lot of government, there are a number of certificate authorities out there in these disconnected environments. So you may have to go through the process of when you have a server certificate, then importing several routes to trust that new server certificate. So we put on this slide this little highlight here. I don't know if anyone has experienced this pain, but when you import certificates for trust of your server certificate, Portal is actually going to try to restart every time. Well, if you have like 5, 6, 7 of these things to import, that becomes really frustrating. So at 10.5 or 10.6, we actually introduced a little button there, if you happen to see it, where you can say, as I'm importing server certificates and their trust, don't restart the portal until I'm all done, or something like, until you got them all in there. So just highlight that. That's a little time saver for some of you that may have worked through this prior to 10.6. If you want to update the ArcGIS server internal certificates, you can do the same thing. It has an admin API. It looks very similar. You can either import PFX, PKCS12 server certificates along with its trust chain in a similar kind of interface. What did I miss? Same stuff.
No, yep.
When you're importing the server to ArcGIS server, you also have to import the trust chains for that server certificate. The nice thing in ArcGIS server is no service restart is required. It kind of handles this for you automatically when you're done. All right, so let's take another one of our common problems we threw out there at the beginning for you. So there was a problem where I am, and we're going to show it to you, where I'm going to try to federate through a DNS alias to a server, and it allows me federate, but I do have a data store registered with it, but now I can't select it as a hosting server. So we're going to solve this problem for you right now to show you a couple things. And what we're going to do is we're going to do some certificate imports to overcome a certificate DNS name mismatch, okay? So remember the one thing that I pointed out a while ago is when a client talks to a server, and a client here can be another server, talks to each other, it has to also talk, the URL in the certificate has to match the URL by which it's being called. If that doesn't match, then we have what we call a name mismatch, and that is also an SSL issue that probably many of you deal with. All right, how do you know that when this SSL error is occurring? Well, we're going to look at here in the UI, it'll just be grayed out, and you won't know as an administrator. It's like, why can't I select this? Well, let me get on call with tech support. Let me send Craig a really nasty email because I know him at Esri, and he can try to help me out. But really, if you go to the logs, we have much better logging now to highlight when SSL problems are occurring. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually create a new ArcGIS server signed certificate with a SAN so that it can be called either by the machine name or by the DNS name, okay? So let's just, are you ready, Craig? You want to walk through that?
I'm ready, yep.
All right, here we go. So I will have a little demo here. So I'm going to sign in, or should already been signed in. Craig yells at me sometimes for not being more prepared in some of my demos. All right. So I'm an admin. I've installed my port on ArcGIS server. Now I'm accessing a DNS alias here. So the server name is actually some other machine name, but I'm going through a DNS alias. Now the web server is all secure. I got a good certificate on the web server, okay? So I'm going to add a server. So I'm going, and it just happens to be on the same machine. So I'm going to go, hey, the public URL is going to be my DNS alias web adapter, and my admin URL is going to be my DNS alias / ArcGIS. Give it super secret password. I'm going to say add. Ooh. All right.
Here we go.
Here we go. So moment of truth. So right now, you know, when you add a federated server, you know, there's some things going on in the background, some services are starting up on the ArcGIS server. That's why some of these things take, you know, a few seconds to kind of complete themselves. All right, waiting for it.
This is, we do this all.
All right, so sure enough, it federated, so I'm happy about that. Then I come down here and be like, it gives me a weird message. It says, this federated server uses a non-ArcGIS data store, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, the data store is registered. I can go in ArcGIS Server Manager and see it. What's the problem? All right, so I'm a portal admin, so what am I gonna do? I'm gonna open an email to my IT guy over here, Craig, and like send him a few curse words like, you need to fix your stuff. Craig, can you fix my stuff or what?
We're gonna fix it. So, the first thing here is, how do we know that, you know, we have an SSL problem at hand? The first thing we want to do is go to portal admin, right? And we want to look at our logs. So we're going to come here to the logs and we're going to run a quick query. And maybe I got my browser a little too zoomed, but that's all right. So I see that, you know, we cleaned out our logs here a little bit ago, but what I can see now is that error, we have a certificate exception, and we have no subject alternative DNS name matching our URL. So I know I've got a certificate error in here. So I know that the resolution that I can do to fix this is add a subject alternative name to my certificate. So in this case, Bill was federating an ArcGIS server to portal. So we need to go to that ArcGIS server and we need to take a look at this. So in ArcGIS server, that's here at machines. And there's the machine name. So that's the actual machine name. And you'll know up here in the URL, it's different, as Bill mentioned, right? That's the DNS entry for it. So we've got a mismatch going on there. So we want to come into the machine, and I can see that it's using this self-signed certificate that it installed. And if we were actually to look at that certificate, and again, we'd see that is the name on there, and so we have that mismatch. So how do I solve it? In this case, there's a few ways we can do it, but what we're going to do is we are going to generate a new certificate, and as a part of the certificate generation process, what we do down here is enter in a subject alternative name for the DNS entry, okay? So I did that a few minutes ago just in the interest of time here. Oops, and I want to come down and show you guys that. So here's this self-signed 2, and you'll note now I have the DNS name techtxssl.esri.com. So I'm just going to configure ArcGIS Server to now use this certificate. And actually I'm going to make sure I'm going to copy and paste this just so I don't make any spelling mistakes here. And so now we're saying, hey, we've created this new one, it has the DNS entry, and oh, by the way, ArcGIS Server, you go ahead and use that certificate. So I now say, Bill, take a deep breath, give it about 60 seconds for the server to reboot, and you should be able to select your hosting server. So these are always the fun moments here in the live demos. ArcGIS Server, the service is restarting. If Bill and I have done this correctly, we're going to be able to select that. So
All right.
Here we go.
Go ahead.
Coming to you.
So just one other thing, I had my dev tools open, and when errors like this happen also, you can open your web developer tools, and you can see like when a error occurs. So basically, there's a portal proxy trying to make a call to this guy. It returns this weird 500 error for some reason, but really at the end of the day, this is an SSL problem occurring. All right, so what do I need to do here, Craig? I just need to refresh? Good. All right, so let's...
we just need ArcGIS Server to come alive.
You tell me when. Hey, how about a quick question?
Oh.
Someone got a quick... Yes, sir. Sure. So that's a really... that's a really safe way to overcome some of these.
Repeat the question.
Oh, the question is, when you have when you have this scenario, DNS alias is separate from a machine name, is it best to get a certificate issued to you that has both the DNS and the machine name in there automatically? And the answer is yes, that's a good practice, and absolutely you can do that. So that way you're assured that you can use it, and both of those names are going to be there no matter which way it's accessed, and you'll be successful in that scenario. All right, Craig, how we doing?
I'd say give it a shot, Bill.
All right, are you switched on?
You're on here, yeah.
So I'm not sure what I need to do here. What, refresh, you think?
Let's refresh the browser, and you should.
In our practice, we were unfederating and trying again, so I'm actually not going to do that and see what happens. All right, so look at that. So now my server validates, and now I'm able to select this guy here. That's because now when Portal tries to talk to server on the back end over 6443, using my admin URL there's no longer a name mismatch. So since we put that text, that TechTXSSL name on that certificate in addition to the server name, then things match up. So in this particular case, we've been able to solve our problem.
Check.
Check box, moving on. Now I can go home for the weekend and I don't have to make Craig stay all weekend to fix an issue for me.
Question in the bag.
Yep. So the question is, he has a NetScaler, which I'll just generically say it's a load balancer. I know it's much more than that. And then where he has a properly signed certificate, then behind it he has, let's just say, 2 ArcGIS servers, that have self-signed certificates on them. So the question is, does he need to put the SANs on the signed certificate, or?
No, not in that case, right? Because
Yeah, I don't think so in that case.
not
I don't think it would be
case.
necessary in that
right,
case.
Yeah, and not in that case, because those certificates that at the ArcGIS server tier are specific to the URL, that URL. So
Right.
you would want to leave those alone in that case.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit more in depth after the session is over, if that's okay. 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 Let's keep moving forward. I know we got some questions, but we're only got 15 minutes left, and we're a couple more things to get through, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Am I still going, Craig?
Yes, you.
All right, let's move on. So just be aware that I know we're talking a lot about Portal and ArcGIS Server. The data store also uses an internal signed certificate on 2443. So if any security folks are within your organization, you have to replace it. We actually also provide the means to do that. It's a little bit different. You have to do it through a command line tool versus a nice admin API, but there is a way to do that as well. All right, so we've talked a lot about replacing the self-signed certificates with signed certificates or dealing with them. Another aspect of this is, well, how does Portal and ArcGIS Server now call out to external services as becoming essentially the client in this case, and be able to trust calling external services, such as a print task calling out to get data from another ArcGIS server or different things like that. So there's also this concept of importing the root and intermediate certificates into the admin API so that both ArcGIS Server and Portal can create proper trust to these external services as well. Okay, so in Portal admin, there's an admin API, the Portal admin API, of course. In the same area where you would have imported a existing server certificate, you can import root and intermediate. You just import those guys and you're good to go. So in the spirit of establishing trust, this is another one of our common problems that we kind of threw out there at the beginning. All right. So in this particular scenario, I'm going to actually import a feature service from a website, a DoD website. I think it was the Corps of Engineers. I forget what it is.
Engineers, yep.
So their root authority is DoD something. It has an intermediate. And if you know anything about the standard Windows trust stores out there, they don't come with these government trust stores in there. This is something that military and government organizations have to do for everyone on their internal organizations. So we're going to present a problem where I'm able to actually load this layer in my browser because my browser trusts that endpoint because I have the trust store on my workstation. But then when I try to perform analysis on it, just because it's a feature service endpoint, I can't select it, and we're actually going to see that there's going to be some errors generated that indicate that there's not a trust chain established. And what we're going to do to solve this problem is actually import these certificates, right? So let's do another little demo. I'm going to pick on my good man, Brett Rogers, sitting right here in the row where I am an analyst, and I am going to, let me get my other window open. All right, so here's my URL. As you can see, it's trusted here. It's certificate, and I'll just look at it. The certificate path has, DoD root chains in them, which aren't typically part of the standard trust chains, all right? But I have that in my browser because I'm a DoD employee, let's just say, for example, and I have it on my workstation, and I can trust it and view it right here, all right? So I'm gonna copy this path. Then I'm gonna go to a different portal. I'm gonna say, I wanna add this in my map. Boom. Sure enough, there we go, all right? Very good, I can add it. I'm like, oh, this is cool. I found this new data source. I can use it for my analysis. I got this project due. It's like 1:49 right now. I gotta have this in by 3 o'clock. I'll be able to get this done quick, all right? Oh, I gotta do a little buffer thing here real quick to solve some problem, create the buffer tool. Why can't I select it? Why isn't it there? All right, so what do you do as an analyst? You open an email and you type a belligerent email to Craig, the IT guy, saying, it's Friday afternoon, you got to stay all weekend to solve this problem. Craig, can you solve my problem?
We'll solve it in the next 5 minutes. All right, so a recurring theme here. How are we going to determine that we have an SSL issue, right? Well, we want to get to our portal logs. So let's go into our logs. Let's run a quick query here. and let's see what it says to us. It says, hey, look at, you got a, cert exception here. These things, these PKIX, the cert exception, these are, tips and cues that you've got an issue with trust.
Who's seen errors like this in your logs when you have problems?
Yeah, unable
All right,
to find
that's
valid
good.
certification path, right? So I know, hey, what we've got is we've got a trust chain issue. Going all the way back to those first slides that Bill talked about, the trust chain. And so in this case, we have two, right? We have a root authority and an intermediate authority, which Bill showed you. So to solve this problem, I need to import that trust chain into my portal trust store. So here at Portal Admin, if I come to Security and then SSL certificates, and we're going to say import root or intermediate. And I am going to browse out to those certs for the root certificate authority here. So we'll get that one first. And we're going to have to give this a quick name, DOD root CA3. And we're going to check this box. Don't restart portal just yet, because I got another one I want to bring in. So we're going to import it. And then we got to do one more because we had the chain. So we got to get the intermediate cert in there as well. So we're going to grab that.
When there's ever a question of which certificates you need to import when you have a chain, intermediate, and sometimes it may be 3 or 4 deep, you got to have them all. It's not the top one. It's not the first one. You got to have them all in there to establish proper trust.
Yep. So at this point, we take Bill's belligerent email and we say, take a deep breath, relax. We got the problem solved already. Give it a couple minutes, let the portal restart, and you'll be able to do your analysis. So here's the thing, while we're waiting, this is another demo moment time where we got to buy ourselves a couple seconds. Here's that portal service is restarting. Be aware of that as portal administrators, that when you import these trust chains into your portal, it is going to restart unless you check that box. Therefore, when it's restarting, you're bringing your portal down. So if you need to have outage windows, or you need to just tell your users, hey, we're going to be down for a couple minutes as we take care of this, be aware of that, or otherwise you're going to get some additional nasty grams from the user community.
So here's what happened. Craig says, hey, I fixed the problem. I was like, oh, cool. Let me come over here and check it. I'm like, throw my hands up.
Now he's really getting
Now I sent Craig another email. I was like, I don't even know what you're doing, but you need to fix this. So if you've ever seen this, don't be too worried. This is what happens when portal restarts. Now, if you restart it overnight and you come in the morning and you see this, yeah, now you got a problem.
Then
all
be
right?
worried. Yeah.
Be worried at that point. But if you reboot it, just bear with it a little bit. As many of you know, portal does not restart instantaneously. All right. Well, actually, that was pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
We'll take that.
All right, so I'm going to try this again. This is Craig. He sent me an email back saying, all right, go. Get your job done. So I'm going to go over here to map. I'm going to add the same layer again. Got a little layer here. That's very good. I got some points on the map. Come over here to analysis. Let's see if we can do a little buffer now. Oh, look at that. Now I got my buffers there. I can kick this guy off. I can get my job done. So life is good at this point. All right. Yes, sir. Quick question. All right. That's a great question. So if you go to a website, and let's say you didn't trust it, you can always go to the certificate and see the chain. They come along with the server certificate. If you don't trust them, there'll be like little red X's behind them here. But each one of these guys here, you can view the certificate. You can say copy to file. So you can say about the chain directly. Each one of those, yep. Individually.
Exactly.
Can't do it all in one. All right, we're running short on time, Craig. How much more we got?
About 5 minutes left. We're good shape. Wrap it up. We're good.
All right, establishing trust to external root stores in ArcGIS Server. Same thing. We were just kind of focused on a portal situation, but ArcGIS Server backend, if ArcGIS Server is having a call out, you need to establish trust. It has a very similar admin API to be able to import on the ArcGIS Server side of things as well. Just a couple other considerations. If you are really deep into SSL, PKI, and Cipher suites and things like that, then we do have options both in Portal Admin as well as Server Admin where you can adjust the protocols. If you wanted to actually go back and enable TLS version 1.1 or something like that, you can do that. And if you even begin to understand Cipher suites and the different encryption algorithms there, you can actually change those as well. So we actually provide options in both those admin endpoints. Now, how many people are just online and have run into what you believe to be an SSL issue? Anyone? All right, just a couple. So I'm not sure how many people know this, but you can actually import the custom certificates, custom CAs that aren't just widely known, into your ArcGIS Online organization. It is not available through a UI. It is only available as a developer resource, but basically, if you were to come here and click on the link of this slide, this is how you can actually import certificates into your ArcGIS Online organization. So if you need to reach out to some special DoD or something like that, or endpoints, then your online will actually now start to trust those as well. So I wanted to highlight that. That's not necessarily well publicized, but we do have that capability there as well.
That was new at 10.6.1, undocumented. Now it's documented, right? Or is it 10.6 and that came about?
Well, I guess online doesn't exactly sync up with 10.6, 10.6.1,
last summer.
But yeah, it's become much more documented in the REST API.
And this should help with the mobile problems that we might be seeing. That could be a solution to.
Perhaps.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So key takeaways. I know we've gone over a lot. Hopefully the demos, brought a little bit of clarity to some things. But SSL is all about secure and encrypted communication, and it's all about trust. It begins at the web tier and can extend all the way down into your ArcGIS Enterprise installation. Web tier is easy. When you're dealing with the back end and what portal may be talking to, ArcGIS server is talking to, there's a little bit more work to be done there. And if anything we want to highlight here is look at your portal and ArcGIS server logs. If you've been having problems and you didn't think they were SSL related or something like that, go look at your logs anyway, because you may see some of these errors in there, then it may help direct you to be able to fix some of these issues. Please take our survey. If you really enjoyed this workshop, mention my name, but if you didn't, mention Craig's name. Is that fair? All right. So we got 2 or 3 minutes, but I think we got some time here to the next session, I believe. So we can now take some questions. I see that gentleman right there is ready to go.
In our organization, we've gone down the route of having a single certificate. The common name that the main URL we access everything on.
Yep.
In our plan, we have 20 or so different services.
Okay.
We pull out all of these services.
Okay.
It all seems to work fine at 10.5.1. Are we going to have any problems with that? That's the rest of the practice going forward as well.
No, that's fine. So I think your question is, you have a certificate. Is it a wild card, or you just have one that has like a whole bunch of sands in it?
Yeah.
And that's okay. We've seen customers do that. That works fine. Nothing about our software from one release to the other distinguishes between certificates. I mean, certificates are a well-known spec thing outside of air control. So if it works in 10.5, it should continue to work moving forward. So you shouldn't have a problem with that at all. Yes, sir. You have to put the wildcard in the SAN as well. So you would have the wildcard as the common name and the wildcard in the SAN. So let's just clarify the SAN just for a moment. Craig made note of this. It is the PKI spec where a certificate should always have a subject alternative name. For the longest time, browsers didn't enforce that. They're like, well, if there's not one there, as long as the common name is there, then life is good. And it's been signed by somebody. But in the recent year or so, because of security and concerns and everything else, our browsers have started to enforce many aspects of the spec where it didn't necessarily enforce it before. So it expects a SAN to be there. So in a wildcard situation, it would be the common name and you would need to put it in the SAN. Yep, same value. Anybody learn anything? Okay, yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, he beat you. Oh, you learned something. That's good.
Question.
Signed certificates. Actually, that's a great question. And the question is, signed certificates renew. You know, you just can't get a signed certificate that lasts forever. Typically, it's perhaps anywhere from 1 to 3 years, maybe, or something like that. We have had customers who have gone back into work on a Monday morning, and their entire system is broke. And why is that? Because their signed certificate that they imported in ArcGIS Server portal has expired. And when you have a expired certificate, nothing works. I mean, it doesn't even it just, you know, it won't even navigate to it. HTTPS. You know, I don't think we do anything to warn you that this is about to happen.
No, we don't.
And that's actually great feedback. We probably need to build that into our UI in that capacity in some sense.
That would be good.
So the answer is no, we don't have anything to help you, but that's great feedback. It's something that we probably need to put in there, whether it be a notification, or something to let portal administrators know that that's about to happen. Great, good question.
And the bottom line is, if your cert's about to expire and you have to renew it, you just have to go through the process again, the importing process.
Yeah.
Yep. There was one over here, I think. Somebody? No. Good.
This gentleman, yes, sir. What's that?
Is there a tool you use to validate the chain?
Is there a tool to use to validate the chain?
There's nothing that you would. I don't think there is a tool that would.
Are you talking about behind the firewall, or do you have internet access? You know,
That's the Open SSL checker might.
I didn't highlight it at the beginning, but this is a cool tool. It's you know, on the open internet. It's not something you can download. Let's see, this guy.
Yep. Yeah. Right.
There's a SSLshopper.com. If you go there and put in a URL, it actually then interrogate. Oh,
I got you.
Oh, can y'all see or not?
No, you didn't.
Oh, they can't see my screen.
I know you didn't click on it.
Well, you're supposed to be on top of this. I don't know what you're talking about.
You didn't click on it.
All right, so let's go to, should we put Esri under the gun here?
Sure, go for it.
So you put in some URL, and it's actually going to go out and interrogate that guy and give you all kinds of information about it, including when it will expire.
But that's not going to work in disconnected systems or on internal certificates.
Sure.
So.
But this is maybe something you can play with on the open internet. So yeah. Oh, DigiCert has a tool you can download? Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay.
Oh, is he saying that OpenSSL, right. OpenSSL, the tool, the EXE, has tools that you can use to validate. Yeah, that's a good point. I did know that, so good point. Yeah. All right, well, if there are any other remaining questions, feel free to come up. The expo is only open for 2 more hours. If you got some deep security questions, there's people that can help you there as well. Thank you for coming, take the survey, all that good stuff.
Safe job.